Mema.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes, please.
Good. Okay, so this morning we are doing research methods. Yesterday we did pharmacology. This morning is for research methods. Last week when I met you, I told you that you'll be doing project work during your level 400, which is going to be next academic year. So our aim is to prepare you for your research that you'll be doing in your level 400. So all through this semester, like I told you last week, I'll be introducing you to the concept of research and what it entails. This week, I'll just introduce you to the various types of research that we have, so that when you start working, you would know how to select the type of research to do, or the type of research design that you would be doing. So today is mostly going to be introduction into research methods. It will be an introduction into research methods. Like I told you, you would all be doing research. And research is a very, very, very important component of your curriculum. So you would ask, yeah, does somebody want to say something? No, good. Okay. Before we can begin, there are a few definitions that you should be aware of that would help us as we progress. There are some few definitions that you should be aware of that would help us as we progress. The first is variable. You'll be hearing me using the word variable. But what does that mean? A variable is any characteristic, any number, or any quantity that can be measured or quantified. That can be measured or quantified. That is what a variable is. It is a characteristic, a number, or a quantity that can be measured or quantified. That can be measured or quantified. Now, in your research, you'll be measuring certain quantities. For example, if you are conducting a research on the prevalence of teenage pregnancy, if you are conducting a research on the prevalence of teenage pregnancy in Kumasi, who is this person? Who is this person? Good. So yeah, like I was saying, a variable is a characteristic, a number, or a quantity that can be measured or quantified. If you are conducting a research into the prevalence of teenage pregnancy in your community, you would go counting the number of teenagers who are pregnant. So that will make that number you are counting the variable. That will make that number you are counting the variable. So the number of pregnant teenagers is a variable. If you want to determine the prevalence of anemia amongst pregnant women visiting your facility. You will go measuring their HB level, and from their HB level, you determine whether or not they are anemic. So you counting the number of people who are anemic would make that a variable. So a variable is a characteristic, it's any characteristic, number or quantity that you can measure or you can quantify. Eunice, this is your last warning. I would mute you again. If you unmute yourself, I'm going to remove you from this class. Eunice Opokwa German. If you unmute yourself again, I would remove you from this class. Good. Now, we have two types of variables. We have the dependent variable and we have the independent variable. For the dependent variable, we are looking at the final outcome that we are seeing. That is the dependent variable. For example, if you want to determine the factors that are influencing teenage pregnancy in your community, the teenage pregnancy is the final outcome, making it the dependent variable. You want to determine the factors that are influencing teenage pregnancy in your community. Teenage pregnancy in this scenario is now the final outcome. It is the final outcome. So it would make the teenage pregnancy the dependent variable. The independent variable would now be the factors that are influencing teenage pregnancy. So a factor that is influencing the final outcome is what we refer to as the independent variable. Is referred to as the independent variable. Factors that can influence the final outcome. That is what we call the independent variable. So in our example, teenage pregnancy is the dependent variable. The factors, what are some of the factors that can influence teenage pregnancy? Broken homes, poor sex education, lack of awareness, poor income status. All of these individual factors would be the independent variables. They are collectively the independent variables. So a variable is a quantity that you can measure or quantify. We have two types. We have the dependent variable and the independent variable. The dependent variable looks at the final outcome. That is the final outcome you are aiming to study. It is the final outcome that you are aiming to study. For the independent variable, it is looking at the factors that when you manipulate can affect the independent variable. So I hope with this, you are good with the differences between dependent and independent variable. Good. Any question? No. Are you sure? Yes. Can we continue? Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir,
thank
please
you.
can you go over for us?
Like I said, your independent variable is the final outcome. For every study, you are trying to prepare soup or stew. Your independent variable is the final stew you have finished preparing. It is the final stew you have finished preparing. But what has affected the taste of that stew is the amount of pepper you added, the amount of spices, the amount of meat, the amount of other ingredients. So all these things that you are putting into the stew to prepare the final stew, that is your independent variable. Whilst the final outcome, the final stew, is your dependent variable. The outcome of your stew depends on the ingredient you have added. The final taste of your stew depends on the ingredients you have added. That is why it is dependent. It's a dependent variable. It depends on the factors. But those factors are independent. Your salt can stand on its own. Your spices can stand on its own. Your pepper can stand on its own. But when you combine them together in the right proportion, then you can make a tasty stew. So your dependence variable is the final outcome that you are seeking to measure, whilst your independent variable are the individual factors that can influence your final outcome. So that is the difference between dependent and independent variable. Good. So now, what is research? How do we define research? Research is the systematic, rigorous investigation of a situation or problem in order to generate new knowledge or validate existing knowledge. Research is systematic and research is vigorous. It's vigorous. When you are conducting research, you are either going to be coming out with new knowledge that nobody else has come out with, or the knowledge you would come out with would be something old that we already knew, but you'll be validating that old knowledge that we already knew. For example, teenage pregnancy. We all know that broken homes, coming from a broken home, can lead to teenage pregnancy. That one we all know. We learned that in social studies, right from JHS. We learned about teenage pregnancy, and we continue with SHS. So we all know that broken homes is one of the factors that can influence teenage pregnancy. So if you conduct your study and your study shows you that teenage pregnancy is influenced by the existence of broken homes, is that a new knowledge? No, that knowledge is not new. We knew that already. But what does that knowledge you found out do? What does it do? It validates the existing knowledge. It validates the existing knowledge. What you already knew, your research has now come to validate it. Some research too can also come out with new knowledge. Maybe you found out that now it is those who are going to church that are more likely to become pregnant as teenagers. That would be a new knowledge. That would be a new knowledge. So your research can either come out with new knowledge, or it can come out with something that we already knew, but it will be validating that existing knowledge. It will be validating that existing knowledge. Research is a process that is methodical. It follows a method. You don't just wake up and start doing research. You will have to follow laid down procedures. And it is objective. We don't put our feelings inside research. What we are searching for, it is either it is there or it is not there. We try to remove all subjectivity from our research. So we are as objective as possible. We are as objective as possible. And apart from it being objective, it comprises of the gathering of information, analyzing of that information you've gathered, and then from the analysis, you would draw a conclusion. You would gather information, you would analyze the information, and then you would draw conclusions from that information, from that analysis that you have done. What do we mean by this? When you go to your facilities. I think now almost all facilities are using the computerized system. So it makes the record keeping digital. But then I think there was a time we're recording most of our records on paper, right? Do you remember that era? Most of you do. Yes, you remember. Now, were there times you were recording specific situations that happen in the facility? Maybe the number of patients that have come in with malaria, the number of patients that have come in that are retroviral active. Was there a time you were making all these records, keeping all these records on a physical paper? Was there a time you were doing that? Yes, sir. Yes. There was a time you were doing all this physical record. But then if you noticed when you were taking that data, all you were doing was just taking the records, but you could not tell how bad or how good the situation is until you found the percentage of the people who were coming with who were having the HIV, or percentage of people who were coming with malaria. You are collecting the data, yes. You are collecting that data from them. But unless you find percentage, you would not know how severe the situation is. All you will be saying is, it looks like it is high, or it looks like it is low. But you will not know for sure how terrible or how good the situation is unless you found percentage. So percentage, you gathering the information is one of the first things you'll be doing in your research. You'll gather the information, but then you would also need to analyze the information, and that is where you'll be finding the percentage. So you finding percentage is analysis. It is you analyzing the data you have collected. And then from your analysis, if you found out that the malaria cases, 50% of people who are coming to your facility had malaria, then it will tell you that it is very high. So there's a high prevalence of malaria in your facility amongst your clients. So your research would demand for you to, one, gather information, two, analyze the information, and then three, draw conclusions. And you can only draw the conclusions after you have analyzed your information. If you don't do your analysis and you are drawing conclusion, the most you can say is that it looks like the situation is terrible. It looks like the situation is good, but you can never say for sure how it is unless you have done your data analysis. So you first gather the data, you will analyze the data, and then from your analysis, you will draw conclusion. From your analysis, you will draw conclusions. So these are the basic steps involved in research. So research is very important in your profession and in your quest for your BSc midwifery. Research is very, very, very important in your profession and in your quest for your BSc midwifery. Because day in, day out, you will be encountering new situations that you in your facility will be the one to detect, and not me in my workplace in the university. You in your facility, you are the one that is very close to the situation. So you are most likely going to be the first person to detect whatever issue there is in your facility or in the community that your facility takes care of. So it is very, very, very important, and it enables the expansion of society's knowledge and comprehension of the world around it. Research facilitates the development of new theories, testing of current theories, and the exploration of the world's intricacies. In the recent past, it depends on how recent is recent, but in the recent past, we were using chloroquine to treat malaria. But today, why are we no longer using chloroquine? Because research showed that it is no longer effective. Research showed that the use of chloroquine is no longer effective. So we no longer use chloroquine to treat malaria. We no longer use chloroquine to treat malaria. But we are now using artemether-lumefantrine, even for pregnant women. How did we start using it? Because of research. Research showed that it is safe to use during pregnancy. There was a time we were not giving pregnant women folic acid, iron supplements, and multivitamin as their routine drugs during pregnancy. But why are we now doing it? Because research showed that it was beneficial. So if you don't conduct research, you can't develop new theories. You can't improve on the practices that are currently there. I'm sure even in your facilities, you have noticed certain flaws in some of the protocols that you are using. But if you don't conduct research, you can't show for sure that those practices or those protocols are flawed. And you can't also be able to come out with a better protocol. So research is very important to you in your profession and in your education. In your profession and in your education. Good. Now, when you are conducting your research, research usually entails one, you generating a research question. So first, you would ask yourself, nowadays when you go to church, the teenage girls in your church, they are all pregnant, or most of them are pregnant, or some of them are pregnant, and it is disturbing you and your pastor and your sofumame. So your sofumame said to you, the way our girls are getting pregnant, we need to do something. We need to do something. Then you told your sofumame, yes, I will do something for you guys. I will do research to find out how bad the situation is, or to show whether or not the situation is bad or not bad. So that is the problem. The problem is that the girls in your church are getting pregnant. So from that, you come up with a research question. What is the prevalence of teenage pregnancy amongst the teenage ladies in your church? What is the prevalence of teenage pregnancy amongst the ladies in your church? So that is a question your research would be seeking to answer. That is a question that your research would be seeking to answer. So in that situation, you have generated a research question. You have generated a research question. And then when you generate the research question, in order to now perform the research, you need to sit down and plan. You need to sit down and plan how exactly you will conduct the research. So first, you select the research design. You would select the research design. You would check how long it would take you to do that research. You would also look at the materials you would need to conduct that research. You will look at how much it will cost you to conduct that research. If you check your pocket and your pocket is not deep to be able to fund the research, you would have to stop, or you will have to seek funding from your sofumame or the church itself. If you know that you would only get break from work for about 1 week, it means that your studies should be conducted during a 1 week period. Because if that 1 week elapses, you will no longer have time for the research. So you will check your budget, you will check your time, you will select your research design, and you look at other things that you will be needing for the research. So that will be your planning. So you will plan the research. When you are done planning and everything is now in order, you will now go and start gathering information. So you will go and gather the data. And when you're done gathering the data, you will sit down and analyze it. And when you are done with your analysis, you would now bring out your outcome. The outcome you bring out should not stay with you in your bedroom. The outcome you bring out or your conclusion should not stay with you in your bedroom, so that you and your husband will say, hey, Eddie, that is all you'll be doing in your house. You won't do that. What you will do is that when you are done with your conclusion, you will come out and tell your church people how severe the situation is. You will come and tell them how severe the situation is. It's either you are saying it in a spoken way, in a written way, or in a visual form. It is either you're communicating it in writing, or you're telling them with your mouth. When they're done with church service, then you come and announce it. That in your research, you saw that a lot of the church members are getting pregnant. You will come and tell them. Or you can do it in a visual form. You can make a visual presentation of your results. So you always need to communicate your results. That is why when you are done with your project in Garden City, you will be made to write your thesis. So your thesis is going to be in writing. So you write your thesis. When you are done, thesis means that thing you call project work that you not come and do hardcover binding. That is the writing of your thesis. So your thesis, you write your thesis. When you are done writing your thesis, you would also do spoken and visual presentations where you will come and defend your work to me. If I come to your center, you will come and present your work to me. And then I will punch holes in your work and tell you, Mommy, where are you getting the data from? And then you tell me, sir, sir, that's all you were doing, sir. And you not answer anything. And you will score 0. Like people. So please, that is how your project would go. You are done collecting your data. After you are done collecting your data, you would analyze the data, you will come out with your conclusion, and then you will come out and tell everybody what your conclusions are, so that we can all learn and make things better. We can all learn and make things better. So that is how your project is going to go. That is how your project is going to go. Now, I said something. I said research design. I mentioned research design when you are planning your study. What is research design? Research design is the blueprint that leads the process, that leads the research process. It is the blueprint that leads the research process. It is the blueprint that leads the research process. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Now, Techno BF6, I have muted you twice. If I mute you again, you would leave this class. That's your last warning. If you unmute yourself and you disturb, I am going to remove you from this class. So yeah, research design is the blueprint that leads the research process. It basically defines the method and the procedure for collecting and analyzing the data to answer the research question. The research design requires making choices regarding some of the inquiries that will be carried out in the research that will be carried out. The research topic and then the sampling strategy, as well as the technique for collecting data and analyzing the data. Basically, all these things I have read is that they have certain formats that you can follow when you are conducting your research. We have different types of formats that you can follow. And those formats are what we call the research design. When you are conducting your research, you must choose the appropriate research design that would best suit your work. You must choose the appropriate format or research design that would best suit your work. Not all research designs are going to be favorable to you. Not all of them would be favorable to you. So I'm going to take you through all the various types of research designs. And then with that, it will help show you the type of research design that you are more likely going to be using in your work. The first research design that we are going to be discussing is the applied research. It is the applied research. Applied research is a type of research that is used to find solutions to everyday problems, cure illnesses, and develop innovative technologies. In this type of research, you are trying to solve everyday problems and also cure illnesses, amongst others. So the type of research that came out with a car that you have been driving, or if you have not been driving, the type of research that came out with the trotro you have been boarding. You and I are using trotro. Those who are driving their car, let them drive their cars. Cecilia Nyako and I, we are using trotro. Not even the good one, no, the 207. That is the one we, Cecilia and I, are boarding. The research that brought up the 207 that Cecilia and I are using is an applied research, because it was the type of research that came out with an innovation to solve everyday problem. The type of research that came out with the COVID-19 vaccine, the type of research that came out with the COVID-19 vaccine that Rakia Abubakar injected to me last how many years when she was doing community service. She came to me in Kumasi and she injected me with the vaccine. She only did me 2. I had to get the other 2 from elsewhere. So the 2 that she gave me, that vaccine was done by applied research. You're coming out with something new that is there to solve everyday problems. That will be done to solve everyday problems. That is what we call applied research. So the research that is coming out with everyday problems, that is coming out to solve everyday problems, we call those applied research. So the research that came out with your medicines you've been taking, the research that came out with the vehicles you've been driving, the research that came out with the type of clothes you've been wearing, all those are what we call applied research. Most of you, if not all of you, will not be doing applied research. You would not be doing applied research, because I don't know who will be coming out with the treatment of a disease condition. So most of us would not be doing the applied research, but it is something you should be aware of, that type of research exists. That type of research exists. Apart from applied research, we also have a type of research we call basic, fundamental, or pure research. This type of research is just done to satisfy somebody's curiosity. For example, if a research is being done to understand how the universe began, Would that solve any problem? No. Would that change the transportation price from Kumasi to Accra? No. Would that make the Kumasi to Accra road better? No. But it is there to satisfy people's curiosity. It is done to satisfy people's curiosity. A research that will find out the genetic coding of Plasmodium falciparum. It is just done to satisfy someone's curiosity. How does HIV virus reproduce? That type of research is done to satisfy someone's curiosity. So it doesn't solve everyday problems. Basic, fundamental, or pure research, they do not solve everyday problems. They are just done to satisfy scientific curiosity. It is just done to satisfy scientific curiosity. And the main aim of this type of research is to expand knowledge, but not to create or invent something. You're not going to be creating or inventing anything. Most of us too would not be doing this type of research. Most of us, if not all of us, would not be doing this type of research. Now let's move on. We'll now come to correlational research. Correlational research. For correlational research, this type of research demands the use of statistics. It demands the use of statistics. Thankfully for you, you will be studying statistics this semester in Garden City University. Will you like it? Most of you would not, because it is mathematics. Most of you haven't touched your calculator since SHS. The only calculator you've been touching is the one on your phone. So most of you would not like the biostatistics, but it is something you should be aware of. It is something you should be aware of. You should know how to do your statistics, because a lot of you will be doing correlational research. A lot of you will be doing correlational research. So when Dr. Buffa is taking you through biostatistics, please open your ears and open your eyes, because whatever concept he's teaching you, you are going to be using it in your research work. You're going to be using it in your research work. So please, Abelemi, open your eyes. Even as part of pharmacology, we'll be doing some calculation. That part in there, you kill me. So please go and get your calculator back from the person you have rented it to. If you don't remember who you rented it to, go and buy a new one. Because as for pharmacology calculation, butu. So please go back for your calculators. So correlational research, you require statistics. This type of statistics, you want to find out how two different variables, or even more than two variables, are related. You want to find out how they are related. For example, you want to find out how good diet can influence HB level, can influence the hemoglobin level of your pregnant clients. You want to find out how good diet can influence the HB level of your client. When you are conducting such a research, you would not be going with your clients to their houses to find out how they are cooking their food. You would also not be cooking the food for the clients. You will not also be monitoring the clients' everyday activities to find out what they are eating. So the best you can do is to sit the client down and ask the client questions. How is the food you have been eating. Do you eat green leafy vegetables? Are the food sources you have been eating rich in iron? So you ask the patient all the needed questions concerning their diet. And then when you are done, you will check that patient's HB level. So you have gotten all the information you need concerning their diet. And then when you are done, you will check the HB level. So now you've gotten two types of data. You've gotten first their HB level. Second, you have gotten their information concerning the type of diet they have been eating. Now, I have a question for you to answer in the chat. The HB level you have checked based on our research topic, is the HB level a dependent or independent variable? Type it in the chat. Is HB level a dependent or independent variable? Type it in the chat and tell me the answer. Is HB level a dependent or independent variable? Is HB level a dependent or independent variable? Good, you are correct. It is a dependent variable. It is a dependent variable because according to our topic, we were asking, how does diet influence, what is it? HB level. That is what we are trying to determine. So HB level is our dependent variable, and then diet would be our independent variable. So yes, you are correct. Now, we have found out the patient's HB level. We have gotten information on their diet. We can do statistical analysis. We can do a statistical analysis to find out those who have been eating right, are they likely to be having anemia, or are they less likely to be having anemia? Meaning that those who are who are eating the green leafy vegetables, are eating the foods that contain a lot of ions, are HB levels high or are their HB levels low? You can only do that type of research if you do statistics. So in your correlational study, you want to find out how two or more variables are related. You want to find out how two or more variables are related. But that type of research does not tell you the exact cause of anemia. It would not tell you the exact cause of anemia because you are only looking at a diet. But maybe malaria too can cause the anemia. Maybe pregnancy can also cause anemia. Maybe they were bleeding recently and it's also causing anemia. So you don't know the exact cause of the low HB or even the high HB. But all you can establish with the correlational research is that good diet is related to high HB level. That is all you can find out. That good diet is related to high HB level. But it cannot tell you whether good diet is the cause of high HB level. I hope we understand this difference I'm bringing up. Let me repeat, because I know somebody will tell me to repeat, so let me do my own this and then repeat my thing. So let me repeat myself. Before somebody tells me I should repeat, I'm repeating myself. When you do a correlational study, the correlational study doesn't tell you the exact cause of the effect you are seeing. It doesn't tell you the exact cause of your dependent variable. If you study teenage pregnancy and the factors that are increasing teenage pregnancy, although you have looked at what is it? Poor parenting. You've looked at divorce. You've looked at what is it? Poor sex education. You have looked at all these things, all these factors. But you don't know the exact one. You don't know the exact factor that has actually led to the one that is causing the teenage pregnancy. You don't know. You don't know. And correlational study would not tell you the exact factor that is causing the effect you are seeing. So is it divorce? It cannot tell you that. Is it what is it? Poor sex education? Correlational study cannot tell you what is the exact cause of teenage pregnancy. It can't tell you that. The only thing it can tell you is that the children whose parents are divorced, a lot of them are pregnant. Meaning that these two variables are related. Having divorced parents and being pregnant as a teenager, they are related. But you don't know whether it is the having a divorced parents that is causing the teenage pregnancy. You don't know the cause. All you know is that those two variables are related. Those two variables are related, but you don't know the exact cause. Correlational study would never tell you the exact cause. All it will tell you is that two variables are related. That when parents are divorced, their children tend to be pregnant as teenagers. When the teachers don't give them good sex educations, the teenagers tend to be pregnant. When there is poverty in their community or in their household, the teenagers tend to be pregnant, but you don't know the exact cause of the pregnancy. So correlational study is only telling you that the two variables are related or that the two variables are not related, but it would not tell you the exact cause of the dependent variable. It won't tell you the exact cause of the dependent variable. I hope this meets your satisfaction. Does Florence have a question?
Yes, sir.
Florence, what's
Please,
your question?
I wanted to ask if I can say that correlational research method is based on assumptions. Like you can assume, we are not specific.
It's an assumption, yes, but an assumption backed by statistics. You are backing that assumption by statistics because your statistics is telling you that those two things are related. So is it really an assumption? It's not an assumption. It's not an assumption. It's telling you that they are related, but it's not telling you the cause. It's just telling you that they are related. So it's not an assumption. You're not assuming. You're just saying that one more say, but you've not gone to do DNA test. But you're telling that they resemble. That is all it is telling you. That they resemble. But it is not telling you that they are related. No. Yes, they are related, but it's not telling you that the exact cause. So they are related, but it's not telling you the exact cause. So it's not an assumption because it is being backed by statistics. It is being backed by statistics. So you're not assuming, it's being backed by statistics. Good.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. A lot of hands are now coming up. Wait, at the end of our class, you will ask all your questions. So all your questions, write them down. Write them down so that when we get to the end of the class, you will ask all the questions and then I would answer all of them. Good. Let's continue. Yes. This research involves quantifying the variables and determining the strength and direction of relationship through statistics analysis. This type of research seeks to establish the relation or the association or the correlation between two or more variables that do not readily lend themselves to experimental manipulation. So everything that have been said on this slide, I've already said with my mouth. I've already said with my mouth. Good. What are the benefits of correlational research? Its ability to investigate association between variables that cannot be manipulated for ethical or practical reasons. When you're doing a study into the teenage pregnancy and you're looking at the effect of divorce, the influence of divorce, the influence of poor sex education, the influence of poverty. You can't change somebody's poverty status in your research. It is not practical. You can't go and dump 10 billion Ghana cedis in their doorstep and tell them now they are no longer poor. Let's see whether you'll be pregnant as a teenager. You can't do that. So that means you can't manipulate the poverty status. You can't manipulate the divorce status because you are not going to bring her parents back to be married. You can't manipulate the community she's living in, whether in a rural or in an urban area, because you can't relocate her. So when you can't manipulate some variables or the variables you are using in your study, you will tend to use correlational study. So its ability is that it is able to investigate association between variables that cannot be manipulated for ethical or practical reasons. If you are doing a study into HIV patients and your study is to find out the influence of antiretroviral drugs, no, not influence, you want to find out how quickly the retroviral patients will die if they are not taking their antiretroviral drugs. The research, you want to find out the mortality rate, not only mortality rate, how quickly do they die if they are not on the antiretroviral drugs. You would not go to your facility and tell the retroviral active patients that I'm doing a research to find out how quickly you will die if you're not taking your drugs. So I'll split you people into two. Half of you'll be taking the drugs. The other half, you will not get any drug. And let's see how quickly you will die. You can't do that. It is not ethical. So the most you can do is a correlational research where you would ask your retroviral patient, are you taking your medications? They will tell you no. And you'll be like, okay. And then you follow that patient. You follow that patient until they perish. Or you can go to your data. I'm sure you guys also collect data on mortality of some of your patients. So you go and you find out this patient was retroviral active. This patient was not taking their medication, and then they died 10 years later. So you can look at those data, analyze them with statistics to see that, oh, you not taking your drug, people that don't take their medications when they are retrovirally active tend to die in the next 5 to 10 years. So you can only do that type of research using correlational research. You can't go and tell people to stop taking their medication. So what you can do is correlational research. Apart from its ability to investigate association between variables you cannot manipulate, it also has the capacity to test complex theories involving several variables. You can have one research looking at over 20, 30 variables and how they are related to themselves. You can do that type of research with correlational research. And this type of research can be conducted in two ways. It can be conducted in an experimental method, or it can be conducted with a survey method. An example of a correlational research can be pregnant women who use multivitamin supplements deliver heavy babies. I am sure that some of you have heard or you have been telling your patients that if you use pregnant care during the early stages of your pregnancy, you will deliver a heavy baby. And then it will be difficult for you to deliver spontaneously, but rather you would need surgical intervention. You've been telling your patients that, right? Yes, I know you've been telling them that, because they'll come to me in the pharmacy and they'll tell me the same thing. And one must say, me no pregnant care na me akwala no be kase, and then I'll not be able to deliver using the spontaneous vaginal delivery, but rather they will need to operate on me. So the women have that notion in their mind. But you can sit down and conduct that research. The women who are taking the pregnant care right from the beginning of their pregnancy, do they indeed deliver heavy babies? So you can check them, the number of people who have taken the pregnant care from the beginning of their pregnancy, and you check whether they indeed delivered heavy babies, and you find out the correlation. You find out the correlation. You know that it is not only pregnant care that can make a baby be big. The woman can be diabetic. Diabetes can make you deliver a heavy baby. It could be genetic. So there are so many factors. But your research can tell you whether the use of pregnant care in the early stages of the pregnancy, whether it is related to having or delivering a heavy baby. The main disadvantage of this type of research is that it does not establish a cause and effect relationship. It will never tell you the exact cause, but it will only tell you whether they are related. That is all it will tell you. Yes, so I've given you these examples, these advantages and disadvantages for you to read and understand. Good. Now let's go to descriptive research. Descriptive research refers to research that collects data that describe the characteristics or behavior of a particular population. Descriptive research is typically used when the research question seeks to provide a detailed description of a research experience or of a specific experience or phenomenon, and when the researcher seeks to describe the thoughts and feelings of participants in their own words. The researcher does not control or manipulate variables here, but only observes and measures the variable. You would only be observing and be measuring the variable, but you cannot control the variable. You cannot control the variable. So this type of research, you want to describe a specific experience or phenomenon. You want to describe a specific experience or phenomenon. A lot of you will be doing this type of research. A lot of you will be doing this type of research where you'll be describing experiences or phenomenon, or be doing direct measurement or observation of certain practices or certain practices. In this type of research, it would involve collecting data using techniques such as you'll be doing surveys, you'll be doing observations, you can be doing interviews or other techniques, and then you will analyze the data to identify patterns. You analyze the data to identify patterns. So this is what descriptive study is all about. For example, if you want to conduct a study into the most frequent cause of death amongst pregnant women in Ghana, so you look at their records, you look at what has been killing the pregnant women the most. And when you do your analysis, you'll find out the trends. you will see that it is anemia that is killing people the most. You will see that it is what else again can kill them apart from anemia? It can also be what? Heavy bleeding. It can be heavy bleeding. It can also be what is it? What else can kill a pregnancy? Malaria. It can also be malaria. So when you are looking into the most frequent causes of their death, that is a descriptive study. You are determining, or you are looking into an experience, and you are describing and identifying trends and patterns within that experience. So that is what we call a descriptive study. That is what we call a descriptive study. For an experimental study, you are going to be conducting experiments. When we say experiment, it doesn't mean the chemistry lab type of experiment. No. It means that you'll be manipulating certain variables to see how it affects a specific outcome. For example, if you want to know how much fesolate, ferrous sulfate, that you need to administer to your patient before how much ferrous sulfate you need to administer to your patient for their HB level to climb high. How would you go about that type of research? It means that for some patients, you will give them maybe 50 milligram of ferrous sulfate. For another group of patients, you will give them 200 milligram. For another group, you will give them 300 milligram. For another group, you will give them 400 milligram. And then you monitor these 4 groups for, let's say, 1 month and see how fast or how high their HB level would climb. So in essence, what you've done is that you have manipulated that variable. Because you have given different doses. Of ferrous sulfate. So by doing that, you have manipulated that variable. And then you're going to see how that manipulation is going to affect the outcome. And the outcome you want to see is the rise or the degree of rise in hemoglobin level. So that is an experimental research. You have manipulated the independent variable to see how it is going to affect the dependent variable. You have manipulated the independent variable to see how it is going to affect the dependent variable.
Yes, sister.
Please, I need help. I came late. I want somebody to help me with the dependent and independent variables.
Please, they cannot help you. Next time, Kameli. Sorry about that. Nowadays, MTN doesn't want me to be great. So sorry about the disconnection. Let's continue. So yeah, we were in experimental research design. And I think I had finished explaining it, but let me just go over. So in an experimental research design, you are going to be manipulating the independent variable to see how it would affect the dependent variable. You'll be making changes in your independent variable to see how it would affect your dependent variable. So basically, that is what an experimental research is. We also have exploratory research, where there is a new phenomenon, and then you might be the first person that is investigating that phenomenon. So you want to see, you'd want to explore that phenomenon. So you can do an exploratory research. Where you are trying to explore that new phenomenon. Most of you would not be doing exploratory phenomenon because most of you like doing anemia. then you do PPH, then you do teenage pregnancy. Then you guys choose something different to make your project unique, so that you not go and repeating yourselves. So yeah, most of you would not be doing the exploratory research, but there is an existence of such a research where you can be exploring a new phenomenon to see how you can generate some factors that can affect that phenomenon. So that is what we call an exploratory research. That is what we call an exploratory research. We also have a research that we call We also have research that we call case study. Most of you are familiar with that word or that phrase, case study. Everything case study, case study, case study. But what does that mean? It's a type of research design that involves in-depth analysis of a single case or a small number of cases. It seeks to understand the complexities and nuances of a particular situation or phenomenon. So you are going to be, for a case study research, you will select a single case or a small number of cases, and you are going to be investigating the complexities involved in that case. Some of you might have even done case study before you wrote your licensure exams, where you were asked to follow one particular client and see everything concerning the client. The subject of this type of study is usually an individual, a group, an organization, a country, or a phenomenon. Case studies involves the collecting of extensive data through a range of approaches. It can include interviews, observations, or even documents, where you take someone's folder and you document what you are seeing in the folders. So that can be some of the ways you collect data in a case study research. But there's a huge limitation with this type of research design. And that limitation is that it can be time consuming to collect the data and then do the analysis. And it can also be resource intensive. I am sure when you were even doing yours for your licensure exams, you had some difficulties because you would have to transport yourself from your house to the person's place. Then you follow the person's, the cost involved, the energy involved is a lot. So it is resource intensive and it is also time consuming. And then it is also prone to researcher bias. Sometimes you tend to put yourself in the research and bringing your own biases in the research. Probably the person you were using for your case study is a traditionalist. So that means that you, a Christian, when you're now coming from your house to enter the vehicle, you'll be like, Erade, where I am going to, you know that it's the traditionalist, Jimmy, then you pray 10 times before you enter the bus. When you come down from the bus too, you pray 20 times before you enter the house. And then even touching the person, you're even afraid. And then all of this can affect the way you collecting your data. Some of us too, we like rich people. So when we see rich people, we start doing times 50. So that means that, hey, instead of the data you're supposed to be collecting, you'll be asking her unnecessary questions. And then you want to do everything special, so that she'll give you 20 Ghana. She said, 20 Ghana, you don't do anything, no. So all these things allows for researcher bias to come in. So that even the thing you're seeing that it is 3, no, because you don't want it to see it as 3, you have made it 10. So researcher bias is very, very, very prone in this type of research design, in the case study. It is very, very prone to researcher bias. We also have something we call longitudinal study, where you'll be following a group of participants over a long period of time. It can be months, it can be years. In longitudinal study, you can be following your clients for months or for years. It involves collecting the data over a period of time. Its aim is to observe changes or trends in behavior, attitude, or characteristics over that period of time. They're going to be observing all these changes in trends and behavior over an extended period of time. And then an advantage of this research is that it allows for the researcher to observe changes in behavior or other factors over time, allowing for a greater understanding of how and why these changes occur. What do I mean by this? You know, there's a malaria vaccine for children, right? Anytime we are having a vaccine or you're making a vaccine, we do longitudinal studies to see, after injecting the vaccine in your patient, how would the vaccine affect their outcome in life over a long period of time? Would it cause paralysis? Will it cause any adverse effects? But you can't do that once. You have to do that over an extended period of time. So that is what we call a longitudinal study. That is what you call a longitudinal. You are following the patient for a long period of time. You are following the patient for a long period of time to see how the intervention that has been made would affect them. To see how the intervention you have made would affect them. So that is what we call a longitudinal study. Now, we also have something we call a cross-sectional study. For a cross-sectional study, you are going to be collecting your data at a particular point in time. You'll be collecting your data at a particular point in time. A lot of you have filled questionnaires. And then most of those questionnaires you filled was a cross-sectional study, because they took all the information they needed from you within a 10 or 20 minutes period. So they are collecting all the data they need over a short period of time, over a single point in time. So whenever you are collecting your data at once from your population, you are doing a cross-sectional research. And I believe that all of you would be doing that type of research, if not most. A lot of you, I can confidently say that 90% of you would be doing cross-sectional research, because you would all be collecting your data at a particular point in time. You will all be collecting your data at a particular point in time. But all of these research designs we have gone over, applied, basic, experimental, cross-sectional, exploratory, longitudinal, we can narrow all of these research designs into three main research designs. The first one is quantitative, second is qualitative, and the third is mixed method research. So you can have qualitative, quantitative, and then mixed methods. So you can narrow all of these research designs down into these three main ones: qualitative, quantitative, and then mixed methods. We'll go over one after the other. For the qualitative, you are dealing with variables that you cannot measure mathematically. You are dealing with variables that you cannot quantify. For example, experiences. If you are asking me what makes me happy, so that means that your dependent variable is happiness. Can you quantify happiness? No, you can't quantify happiness. So you are going to be using qualitative research in that type of a research, asking me what makes me happy. You are going to be using qualitative research. So I will describe to you, I will tell you what makes me happy. So in qualitative research, it deals with phenomena that are difficult or impossible to quantify mathematically, such as beliefs, meanings, attributes, and symbols. The aim of this research design is to gather in-depth understanding of human behavior and reasons that govern such behavior. For example, if you want to do a study into why pregnant women are consuming alcohol, that type of a research would have to be qualitative, because you would need the pregnant women to tell you in-depthly why they are consuming alcohol. You need them to tell you in-depthly why they are consuming alcohol. So this type of research will be investigating the whys and the hows. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? How are you doing this? Or how did you do that? So that is the type of questions that this type of research would be seeking to investigate. The whys and the hows. The whys and the hows. That is type of. For the advantages of this type of research, it enables more complex aspects of people's experience to be studied. When you ask me what makes me happy, and I tell you that telenovelas make me happy, I can go in and describe the exact telenovela that is making me happy. But if you present it to me in a questionnaire, you won't give me all the options. All you would ask me is, what makes me, does telenovelas make me happy? And then I would say yes, full stop. But if you do a qualitative research, I can go in depth and tell you the exact telenovela I like, the exact character that makes me happy. What exactly does that character do that makes me happy? So that is qualitative. You can go in depth, and get the person's experience. And then apart from that too, individuals can be studied extensively. That questionnaire they gave you to fill, that took you 5 minutes, they didn't gather everything you know. They didn't gather everything you know. They didn't gather everything you know. They just took what they felt was important to them, and then they left with your responses. But if they had sat you down in qualitative research, and then they had asked you in-depthly, you would have given them more information than what they gave you on the questionnaire. You would have given them more information than what was on that questionnaire. So individuals can be studied extensively in this type of research. And this type of research too is also good for exploratory research. It's also good for exploratory research. And then participants can also describe their data or provide their data in their own words. They can provide their data in their own words. But the disadvantages about this type of research is that it's more subjective. there's more subjectivity involved because the person is telling you how they feel. So there's more subjectivity involved. And even when analyzing the data, there's subjectivity because you finished your interview of the person and all the interview was conducted in tree. All the interview was conducted in tree, but you are not going to write your report in tree. You have to write it in English. So that means that when you sit down, you will now have to transcribe everything the person said to you in tree. You have to transcribe it into English. And now the question is, sometimes when you are translating into English, you lose the meaning of what has been said in tree. You lose the meaning. And so in your quest to maintain the meaning, sometimes you even start putting in your own words. So injecting your own subjectivity inside it. So that is one disadvantage of qualitative research. Another one is that it is time consuming. It is time consuming because you can spend hours on one participant. Meanwhile, questionnaire, you would have been done in 10 minutes, but you will spend hours in one questionnaire. You would have spent hours in one questionnaire. And then you'll be using open-ended questions. And these open-ended questions can cause the participants to be giving you too many information. So you'll be collecting lots and lots and lots of data. The relevant ones, the irrelevant ones, you'll be collecting all of them. And then when you sit down in your house and you're now transcribing, then it is issue. So it is time consuming, there's subjectivity, and then you would need open-ended question. But in part of the advantages, it's not in this slide, but let me say it. In part of the advantages, you only need a small sample size in qualitative research. You only need a small sample size. There's some research, qualitative research, you can even do with only 6 participants. 10 participants is okay. You don't need a lot. So qualitative research, it deals with a small number of participants. Good. Now let's do quantitative. For quantitative research, you are going to be dealing with numbers. Numerical data. And that means you'll be employing statistics and mathematical and computational techniques. That is where your biostatistics information will all come if you are doing quantitative research. That means that if you, please try to decide on what you'll be doing now so that whilst you are learning this semester, it will be helping to shape the work you are doing. Because the statistics you are learning in biostatistics and all those calculations you'll be doing will be very, very, very important to you in your level 400. So this type of research involves statistics, mathematical, and computational techniques. And then the quantitative research generally involves using scientific methods, which can include the development of instruments or methods for measurement. Instruments can be questionnaire. The instrument you are developing can be a questionnaire. Methods for measurement. If you are measuring pregnancy, you'll be using what? The RDT, the pregnancy test kit. If you are measuring anemia, that means you would have to determine the hemoglobin level and know how to classify them as either anemic or not anemic. If you are measuring the whether somebody is delivering heavy babies, you would need a scale. You will need a weighing scale. So you can develop equipment and methods for measurement. You would need to develop equipment and methods for measurement in quantitative research. And then you can also have it in the form of experimental controls or manipulation of variables. So you can have an experimental research that would be a quantitative research. And you'll be collecting empirical data, numerical data. That's what you'll be collecting. That is what you will be collecting. And then you would need to analyze that data, mostly using statistics. Advantage of this type of research, it allows the researcher to measure and analyze data. And then the researcher is also more objective. Quantitative research is more objective than qualitative research. So you're going to be more objective about the findings of the research. Disadvantages, it does not discuss the varying interpretation of these different type of people. When you are doing a quantitative research, you are assessing everybody on the same plane. You are assessing everybody on the same plane. You are not going to be looking into the individual variations amongst the people. You are going to be looking at them as a whole. So that is one disadvantage. Another one is that a large number of the population must be involved in this study for it to be more accurate. The larger your sample size in a quantitative study, the more accurate your results are going to be. If your sample size is small, your research would not be accurate. But if your sample size is large, your research will be very, very, very accurate. So that is one thing about quantitative research. That is one thing about quantitative research. Mixed methods means that you are mixing the quantitative together with the qualitative. Mixed methods means that you are mixing the quantitative together with the qualitative. That is what mixed method is. Mixing the two together. That means that the advantages of qualitative, the advantages of quantitative would apply here. And their disadvantages too would also apply. So how would you choose the research design to use? We have discussed a lot of research designs. How would you choose the right one to use? One, it would depend on the research question. If your research question is, how do pregnant women feel about the use of iron supplements? Tell me in the chat, based on what I have just said, would it be a qualitative or a quantitative or a mixed method research? How do pregnant women feel about the use of iron supplement during pregnancy? Will it be, let me narrow it down, will it be qualitative or quantitative? Will it be qualitative or quantitative? Will it be qualitative or quantitative? How do pregnant women feel about the use of iron supplement during pregnancy? Will it be qualitative or quantitative? Yes, most of you are right. It will be qualitative. It will be qualitative because you'll be asking how she feels. You'll be asking of how she feels. That would be qualitative. That would be qualitative. So the type of research question would also navigate you on the type of research design to choose. Also, availability of resources. Availability of resources. If you don't have money, it will be difficult for you to do a quantitative study. Why? Because a quantitative study, you'll be dealing with a large number of people. So that means you have to know how to manage them. You know how to manage them. Managing them means that if you are printing questionnaire, you have to, and you are going to be using 200 people. That is money in the printing of the questionnaire. If you are going to be measuring their HB level, That's a lot of reagents to buy. If you are paying for it yourself, that's a lot of money. So availability of resources can also influence the type of research design you choose. It can influence the type of research design you choose. And then the research setting and the practicality of the research technique. There are sometimes the research technique you want to use is not practical. So you change the technique you want to use. For example, if you want to check the effect of iron supplement in the weight of the baby, if you want to check the iron supplements, the use of iron supplement in the weight of a baby, whether it affects the weight of babies. And then you had wanted to do it quantitative. And then you realize that in your facility, you don't have a weighing, the pregnant women don't feel comfortable coming to your facility all the time, or they don't even come in. So what you can do is that instead of doing a quantitative work, you can do a qualitative work. Asking the few that are coming in, were you taking your iron supplement? They will tell you yes. What type of baby do you deliver? They will tell you, oh, now the baby was heavy. The baby was heavy when I delivered. So the practicality of the setting can also influence you. If you are going to collect data from where addicts are, you would not go there carrying your bunch of papers for who to fill. Who will be filling your questionnaires for you in the tinker yard? Nobody will be filling it. At such a place, you would rather be using a qualitative type of data, or a qualitative type of research. So the research setting and the practicality of the research can also shape the type of research design you choose. And then finally, the research approach of the researcher. Personally, I like using quantitative research. So I would always make sure that when I am doing a study, I'll be using quantitative. Others too would like using qualitative. So they would always make sure that their studies are going to be qualitative studies. So what is your role as midwives in research? What is your role as midwives in research? About 300,000 women die every year during pregnancy, childbirth, or soon after. And nearly 3 million infants die in the first months of life. So prioritizing research in pregnancy can help address these unacceptable high rates of death. Research into midwifery can help do the following things. One, it can help improve the provision of effective family planning. It can also help reduce the rate of preterm births. It can provide high quality care for all women and babies, and it can promote sustainable health systems and reduce the use of unnecessary interventions. I am sure even in your facilities, you have noticed that there are some interventions that are not important, that should not be done. It just complicates things. The only way you can help change that policy or that protocol is by research. And that is your role as a midwife, to conduct those research. So the basic components of your research would be your research question, your literature review, your methodology, and then your result and conclusion. These are the basic components of your research. Even the thesis you'll be writing, these are going to be the basic components. Thank you. Now I can answer your questions. Question time, offering time. Question time, answers time. To start asking your questions. Yeah, Emanuela Osei, please ask your question.
Between dependent and the independent variable.
Speak out loud so I can hear you.
I'm saying I couldn't join early, so I missed the difference between dependent and the independent variables.
A dependent, these two, the dependent and independent variable. A dependent variable is the final outcome you are looking into. What you are studying is the final outcome. If you are looking at factors that are influencing teenage pregnancy, the final outcome of your work is that you're investigating is teenage pregnancy. So teenage pregnancy would be your dependent variable. Teenage pregnancy would be your dependent variable. But any factor that you are investigating that has the ability to influence teenage pregnancy would be your independent variable. For example, you know that coming from a broken home can influence teenage pregnancy. Coming from a community that is low resource or a poor community, coming from a poor home, having little to no education, all of these are factors that can influence teenage pregnancy. So all these factors would be your independent variable, whilst the teenage pregnancy would be your dependent variable. So that's the explanation I can give you. Rita,
Thank you.
what's your question?
Okay, thank you, sir. Please, when you were explaining the qualitative research design or research method, you made mention that the research always requires a small sample size, which you stated like around 6 to 10. So I want to find out what would be the maximum number of participants for the quantitative research. If you want to go into quantitative research, your sample size, what should be the maximum number of participants? And then
When it comes, okay, go on.
okay, and then when you per your explanation, I don't know if I got you well. Does it mean that when you consider using or choosing qualitative research, your tool for gathering your information, is it going to be like interview? And will that of the quantitative be questionnaire?
Okay. So when it comes to qualitative doesn't usually use large numbers of participants, but quantitative would use a large number. As to whether or not there is a maximum number, there is no maximum number for quantitative. When you are doing a quantitative study,
My network. Is it from my end? I can't hear anything.